Power Play Chess, brought to you in association with Kagi. I'd like to show you another fine game by our candidates winner, Domaraju Gukesh. This was played in 2022, July 2022, when he was just 16, an old man, and played in Spain, tournament in Spain, so he's playing black. And his opponent, Alex Garrido, Ton, I assume is an IM. He's rated 2436. And this one stood out in the database because, as we're going to see, Gukesh plays a very fine opening. Yes, E5. Gukesh is clearly a man of exceptional taste and judgment because he plays the Kalashnikov. And as many of you know, I wrote a book on the Kalashnikov available from newinchess.com. I'll put the link in the video description. So I have a particular interest in this opening, of course. And this game actually is a really good example of Kalashnikov strategy for black, and just in general, the kind of advantages, positional advantages that you get when you play the Sicilian as black. So white is playing one of the main lines, and bishop e7 was actually the continuation that I recommended in my book. I mean, you can play this in various ways. You can play b5 straight away, or you can play bishop e6. They're both very interesting. My recommendation was bishop e7. And this knight has to come back into play. This is white's problem, that it takes time to bring the knight back into play. And in the meantime, black is developing very nicely. You can see that black is actually kind of one move ahead in development. Bishop d3 played by white. Now this is a very solid continuation. I mean, sound development, also protecting this e-pawn. g3 is the main line, but bishop d3 has been played quite a lot as well. Knight b4, this is good. You want to take that bishop, and the bishop goes back to e2. And both sides castle. And bishop e6, that's such a chunky square for the bishop. I do like that. It's on a nice diagonal, and of course covers the really important d5 square. Often the fight revolves around that square with this particular pawn structure. a3, the knight is pushed back, and knight c6. So I looked at this position in the book and I thought it was roughly level. So for example, this has been played previously and the knight hops in here and the bishop moves up, and bishop g5. This is such a common maneuver in the Kalashnikov. In the book I call this the breakout bishop. And the exchange of bishops can certainly help black. We can start squares sometimes. Also, I mean, you can see in this position the bishop is doing nothing on e7. Positionally, it can be a very nice move. Okay, so that's the main line, but instead of that, bishop d3 played in this game. And Gukesh plays exactly the move that I recommend in the book, which is great. Knight d7. So why this move? Well, the knight might bounce around to c5 to look at the bishop, which is nice. It might go to b6. But importantly, it also makes room for the bishop to come out to this important g5 square. So it's just climbing out through the window, basically. And on g5, yeah, the breakout bishop looks good. White played b4 to prevent knight c5. I understand that, but actually it does create potentially some weaknesses. Bishop g5, all as advertised, and knight d5. And then rook b8. So this is kind of prophylaxis, because it looks like white is going to break with a4, and c3, defending this pawn, prepares a4. And Gukesh plays positionally in a very sound way. It's important to fight for control of this square. And, well, you can imagine an exchange here that connects the rooks, The rook can come to c8 to hit that pawn. So instead, white decides a4. So this was the idea of playing c3. This pawn is protected. White wants to hit out here and get some play for the rook. Fair enough. But this gives black a positional opportunity to exchange on d5, exchange again, and white is left with a pawn on d5. Now this is exactly what black wants. An exchange of bishops and knight f6. I've had this kind of structure on so many occasions in the Sicilian, not just from the Kalashnikov, but from the Sveshnikov and the Najdorf as well. So black has these 5 pawns on the king side and 2 on the queen side, and white has a pawn on d5, these pawns here, and just 3 pawns on the king side. Now that's significant. So black has this very pleasant 4-3 kingside majority, and very often this can develop into a steamroller. That's another typical theme in this opening that I mentioned in the book. So white exchanges here. Well, this pawn is a little bit weak, and in fact the computers think that white is still okay here, but I would look at this and I would take black every single time. Got a really safe king and very nice pieces. Rook a5. Okay, a little bit of pressure here, no problem. A lot of pressure here. Bishop f1, bishop drops back. This pawn is protected. Oh yeah, incidentally, black would not want to take this pawn. A discovered attack. And once a piece takes control over d5, that's a different story. Then I slightly prefer white. But black does not need to take that pawn, not until one is absolutely ready. And this move I really like. There's no need to rush things. Put the king on g7. Everything is beautifully protected. Lovely pawn majority. What is white doing? There's no need to rush. h3, and that's an indication that white has run out of ideas. But for black, these moves are easy. It's time to get this lovely pawn majority rolling. And once that pawn hits h4, then it cramps white's king. Now that might not look significant at the moment, but if black were ever to break through, then the king is in big trouble. Watch out what happens. Watch out. Queen d3. This is the thing. Actually, black doesn't need to worry about this, because after the exchange, this one is going to drop, and black just has the better structure. But actually, Gukesh kind of forces white into this. Very nice move. Can you think, what did Gukesh play on this next turn? Black to play. What you going to do? You ever think? I'll have a drink.
Warning.
Don't do this.
The ifs are coming.
Hey, Cal. You got my mouth.
This year,
We help ifs find new kids.
Or we just disappear.
Oh, ouch.
Will you stop?
they're wild,
Really bend those knees, ladies.
You want to cover that up?
they're crazy,
You have no idea how true that statement is.
they're turning our world upside down.
Oh. Put some pants on, you're freaking everyone out.
Queen f5. Very simple. He's not worried about the double pawns, as we'll see. Those pawns are rolling. But the simple threat to exchange here and grab this pawn, and the queen can't, well, it's difficult to avoid queen exchange. This one might be hanging, or if the queen comes here, you know, you can imagine the queen shooting down there. So really white has to exchange. And there's a lot of nonsense talked about double pawns. I mean, these pawns are tremendous. They are going to roll. It's a classic Kalashnikov steamroller. So this pawn was taken and this pawn was taken. So this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, that this exchange of b pawn for c pawn actually leaves black in a really good position. These pawns are split, the rook is really active, and black has this wonderful pawn majority on the king side. Compared to the two kings, that's really important. Black's king, very free, can step up behind the pawns and support the pawns. White's king, really cramped. In fact, as we're going to see, very cramped. Rook b3, beautiful active rook. And rook b2. In fact, black could simply start pushing these pawns, that's the best. But Gukesh sees something else. First of all, h4. Now that's a beautiful cramping move. The king is in massive trouble now, so there's going to be a threat probably to play knight e4 to attack this one. Okay, let's see. Bishop d3. f4 played. Bishop c4. This is fatal. White wants to hold on to all the material. I mean, white should actually compromise here. Exchange. It looks completely lost for white. But there's a very clever idea. You can actually play this. And this just about gives sufficient counterplay. Watch this. And then king g2. You take here. And black is going to be distracted by this pawn. But, you know, that's kind of a miracle defense. I imagine that white was in time pressure here as well. So bishop c4 played. And now those pawns roll through. White played rook c3 here. We'll see the end in a second. But just imagine that white played king f1. Okay, how does black make progress? Roll the pawns. So first of all, let's bring the knight out of the way. Bring the king up behind the pawns and start rolling. And that knight also comes into the game. So watch this. For example, well, you can see this is just crushing. I mean, this one could be taken at any moment, or after this, here, go around, attack this one. I mean, it's just a wonderful position for black. Okay, so instead, rook c3 played, and there was a check.